Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of the Humane Summit, the virtual speaker series brought to you by the Humane Education Coalition. My name is Megan Moon, and I am the president and founder of the coalition, as well as the producer of the summit. We are excited to continue our summit today with Tea and Teaching, a facilitated panel discussion sponsored by the University of Denver's Institute for Human-Animal Connection, with technology support kindly provided by Courtney Brown, Senior Community Project Manager at IHAC. We're so happy for their support. After water, tea is reportedly the most widely consumed beverage in the world. And we believe, all of us here believe, humane education should be just as universally understood and beneficial. Join us today for a cup of tea. Hopefully everyone brought some tea with them. And we will talk about the practice and inclusion of humane education. Let's discuss how to make our work more accessible, how to incorporate humane education in formal and informal settings, and how we can grow our field together meaningfully. We invite you to bring your questions about funding, curriculums, resources, marketing, and more to this panel discussion. We're really going to get into the practical application of humane education today. Serving on today's panel are 7 changemakers and thought leaders. We are thrilled to welcome, and feel free to give us a wave if you'd like, so everyone knows who you are, can put a face to a name. Dr. Sarah Bexell, Director of Humane Education at the Institute for Human-Animal Connection at the University of Denver. Lisbet Chiriboga, Program Strategist at TeachKind. Erin Comaskey, Independent Educator and Humane Education Coalition Board Member. Morris Darbo, founder of Liberia Animal Welfare and Conservation Society. Dr. Vincie Ho, founder of Mini Acts for the Greater Good. Dr. Stephanie Idle-Clark, founder and president at the Academy of Pro-Social Learning. And Kimberly Corona, senior program director at Humane Education Advocates Reaching Teachers, or HEART. There are a few functions in Zoom that I'd like to very quickly go over before we get started. First, we recommend that attendees choose the gallery view option. It's in the top right corner of the screen. And that way you can see all of the panelists at one time. So if you're not already seeing that view, we do recommend making the switch to gallery view. It just makes a better picture, and you can really see everyone all at the same time. It's kind of like the Brady Bunch. We also encourage attendees to please introduce yourselves in the chat section that's at the bottom of the screen, that little icon at the bottom of the screen. Tell us where in the world you are located, what you hope to gain by attending today's live panel discussion. Share with us your ideas, your goals. Please do chat with us. Let's get to know each other today. If you have a question you'd like to ask our panelists, please post it in the Q&A section. We will do our best to share your questions with the panelists in the time that we have available today, and we will continue this conversation in the summit, where a recording of our discussion will be posted soon, later today. So we will begin our discussion with a list of questions we have previously collected from a few other educators, and let's get started with our very first question. This one comes from an informal educator. Schools tell me I need to connect to the standards. I am not familiar with these, and I need some help getting started. What would be the best way to begin? Stephanie, would you like to start us off with this question, and then we can open it up to some of the other panelists?
Sure. Thanks, Megan. And this is a great question, I think, to start with. It's a question that I think many of us on this panel probably get asked all the time. So the first thing I'd like whoever asked this and anyone who's thinking about it to recognize is that it's okay that the standards feel intimidating in the beginning. That's normal, even for people who are getting an education degree. I feel it's important that we need to be kind to ourselves as we're learning this new language, because it really is a new language. So for US-based educators, as you're beginning to find the right standards, a first good step would be to find out what standards are actually used in your state. Believe it or not all the states use the same standards. Many people have heard of the Common Core standards, but actually only 41 states and the District of Columbia and then some territories have adopted them. and that is for math and English only. So if your state has not adopted the Common Core standards, then you obviously don't need to spend a lot of time getting to know them or searching through that website. If your state has not adopted the Common Core, or if it's a subject other than math or language arts, you'll want to find those standards that are specific to your state. So good places to start would be educationworld.com/standards, and I'll put all of these in the chat box once I'm done answering. There's, of course, the next generation science standards that you'll want to look at, or using your favorite search engine, put in the words like the name of your state education standards. So for example, if I was searching Texas, because that's a state who has not adopted Common Core, and if you search Texas state education standards, what your search engine would likely bring up would be something called TEKS, the Texas Education Knowledge and Skills Standards. So once you've found them, that's a huge first step, and you want to congratulate yourself on even getting that far. But you're not done. Now you'll need to dig into the standards that you've found to start searching the subject and grade levels that you need. Another big tip that I like to give those who are just starting out is to make sure as you're connecting your program or your lesson to the standards, you're listing only the standards that the learners will be able to do at the end of the lesson, the program, or the unit of study. You know, a common error that a lot of us have done in the very beginning is we list things that the educator's actually doing, when we want to make sure we're only listing things that the learners will be able to do. And I know we have a lot of attendees who are not in the US. Of course, you have educational standards as well. And when I'm working with my international colleagues to try to find those, it's very similar usually to the search that we did to find state-based education standards. So you might search in your favorite search engine, the name of the Ministry of Education, and then education standards, or look on your ministry or Department of Education site. And I'm always happy to help educators who are just starting out kind of locate their standards. That's something that I've unfortunately spent a lot of time searching online. So I will put those links to the Common Core, educationworld.com, and Next Generation Science in the chat box. But I'd like to see if anybody else has anything to add, because we could talk about standards for the entire hour.
So true. Yes, Lisbet.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, just wanted to add on to what Stephanie said. That was a great introduction for educators about standards. Just to throw out an example for people who work outside of the education system, if you do something as simple as read a Humane book to kindergartners and ask them questions about the key details in a text, you're addressing Common Core learning standards. So I just wanted to provide that as a concrete example of what that could look like.
Excellent. Kim?
So I also wanted to just add on to what they both said, and I also think, you know, great concrete example, great introduction. And then just to let people know, if you want to see some examples of, you know, what it might look like, at Heart, we have resources that are aligned to standards so that you could see an example where we have the standards listed, so that it might help you to see how you could do it yourself. And just like Lisbet said, you will be surprised at how much easier it is to align to standards than you might realize. And now Next Generation, you know, they start with science standards, they have English language standards, and you might be thinking, oh, I just learned Common Core. But don't worry, because the Next Generation English language arts standards are not that different from the Common Core standards. So it's just matching up the Common Core that you may have been using with the new Next Generation ELA standards. So we had a lesson about child labor, and we wanted to align to standards, and there was only a couple that I felt like it met. But one of the standards was to write a story in sequential order, right? So we just had the kids write about the life of a child migrant worker from the worker's perspective, and then they wrote their day in sequential order. So we gave them an informational text, and they created it into a fictional text, putting those details. So it can be that simple as just adding a writing activity to the lesson you already have. If you're doing animals, you could have them write the story from an animal's perspective and write about their day in sequential order. So it's a lot easier than you think, just like Lisbet said. And it's just taking what you already have. And sometimes those standards help to enhance what you're already doing. So instead of seeing the standards as a burden, you might see them as a way to enhance your programming. So we've added a lot more literacy to some of our lessons than we would have maybe otherwise. And then I also want to encourage people to think about social emotional learning competencies. I think a lot of schools, especially with the just sort of what's been happening in our society today, they're really concerned with developing those social emotional skills and developing empathy. And those skills go hand in hand with human education, and it's very easy to address those SEL competencies. And I listed the link from Castle where you can see the details of what those competencies are.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Lisbet. Thank you, Stephanie, for your responses. That's great. And just to kind of further this topic in a little bit of a different direction, for teachers, finding space in the day for humane education can be challenging. And we've just heard some unique ways to infuse it and align it with academic content standards. But are there any other ways you can think that we could infuse the curriculum to make the most impact? Kim, perhaps you could get us started on this question, and then we can open it up to some other panelists.
Sure, thanks, Megan. So I don't want to minimize the difficulties that educators have in infusing human education to their curriculum. I know that we expect teachers to do a lot, and they have a lot of expectations, they have a lot of things to address, and it might seem really overwhelming. But what I really think is, if we can think of the purpose of education is to create kind, globally minded citizens who can think about how they can have a positive impact in their local and global community, then we can really think about ways that human education infuses into every single subject that we're teaching. So what I really encourage you to do is take the content that you have already and think about, how does this content relate to my students themselves, other people, other species, and the planet, and then try to infuse those connections into what you're doing. I had a friend who was teaching about history, and she was teaching about war. And instead of just teaching about the facts and the dates, she also thought about the impact that it really had on the people's lives. She thought about animals that were used in the war, like the horses, and that's not normally taught, but that's an impact that we're having. And then also about what the impact that war has on our planet. So these are things she had to teach anyway, but then she just added a social justice lens to it. She added an animal lens to it. She added an environmental lens to it. So think about all your content and how you can add that lens to it. And I think you'll be surprised that it's easier than you thought. And again, I don't want to minimize it, but that if we start to look at that lens in everything that we do, it'll start to come more naturally. And then the other thing that I think about adding it into your curriculum is thinking about skills, not just the content, right? So a huge part of human education is fostering those pro-social skills and how we treat people and other species, fostering reverence for our natural world, promoting critical thinking, and youth empowerment and service. And if you infuse those skills into whatever content you're teaching, hopefully your students will be able to apply those skills to any issues that they're facing in the world. So if they get those skills, they can apply that to whatever they're hearing in the media, current events, their everyday choices. And that's how we can have, I think, the biggest impact while meeting the standards that we already have to do.
Beautiful points. Absolutely. Sarah, yes. Oh, Sarah, you are muted. Let me unmute you here.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. One of the things I wanted to add to all of the great information that Kim just shared is also modeling by yourself as the classroom teacher. Children of all ages look up to their teacher for guidance in their own behavior. And so it wouldn't even necessarily mean you have to add anything to your curriculum, but just in the way that you show up every day and the way that you treat other people, the environment and animals. So easy examples, and some are more difficult than others, but just some examples of that is, the kind of car that a teacher drives, what they bring to lunch and how they bring that lunch, in what kind of containers and things like that, how a spider might be removed from the classroom versus squished. All of those things are easy things to adopt. And at the same time, if they're not adopted, could even conflict with some of the humane messages that teachers might present. So I just wanted to throw that into the mix as creating almost that philosophy of humane behavior in everything we do, as modeled by a teacher, can be, I think, as powerful as concrete lessons.
Yes, Lisbet, feel free to chime in.
Sure. Just to add on to the great information that Kim and Sarah offered, I was a classroom teacher for many years, and one of the best ways that I found to infuse humane education into my own curriculum was through English language arts. Once you determine the skill, the academic skill that you want the students to practice, then you can use a humane resource to have them practice that skill. For example, we send out PETA Kids comic books, a whole class set for teachers for free that you can use as a humane resource for different types of reading activities. And so this way, the students are practicing an academic skill and you're fostering empathy in these students simultaneously, because we know that these days teachers have less and less time to add on an additional lesson about animals, the environment, or human rights. So if you can do it simultaneously, then that's the best way, and that's the way you'll be able to incorporate it daily into the curriculum. And on the TeachKind website, all of our resources keep that in mind, because as former classroom teachers, we keep in mind the types of skills and the topics that are covered in different grade levels, and then we create teacher-friendly materials to go along with that. So I really encourage everyone to visit the TeachKind website, and you could download a wealth of free materials from the website.
Oh, I see lots of hands. Vincie, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Lisbet. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I would like to share an experience with all of you. One of the things that we experimented that worked really well last year was to have teachers across various disciplines to collaborate on one theme over a period of time. Say a week or a month. So last year, our partner school worked on the refugee project, and with us over a semester, and there were a few English teachers, one French teacher, one math teacher, and one fine art teacher who joined the program. And so the advantage of this kind of collaboration is that no teachers would feel that they have to cover everything about an issue in their lessons, and instead they could reinforce one another's teaching. And by repeatedly exposing the students to the same issue, the impact on the students would be more effective and long-lasting. So at the end of the refugee buddy project we conducted last year, the students produced amazing works, including letters to the editor in English, explaining or telling the public why we should all care about the global refugee crisis. And then they presented different statistical representations of of the number of refugees and internally displaced persons around the world. And they also created beautiful paintings in response to art pieces created by refugees in Greece that our partner organization works with. So the result is amazing. It's almost like a total immersion in a particular topic. And it doesn't have to be like a semester long every time, because there are so many issues we'd love to talk about it could be just a week or over a month. And again, it's all about, as Kim said, it's all about contextualizing what is required to be taught around the topic or an issue, instead of like compromising what is required in the syllabus to make room for humane education.
Wonderful. Erin, yes, please share.
I am in a unique position. I'm living abroad in the Netherlands. My children attend an international school, and their curriculum is based solely on this idea of thematic units. And so when I go in and get to work with the students, it is absolutely not an add-on. It's something that just is infused into the way that they filter all of their academic work. So one of the resources I wanted to provide our attendees today is to check out the PYP, the primary years profile. And that helps to talk about what the learner skills are. So we've talked about looking at the whole child, right? Looking at them from both a psychomotor point of view, from an affective point of view, and also from a cognitive point of view. And the PYP, the primary years profile, provides educators with a way of approaching their work in this kind of holistic way. So instead of kind of getting in the weeds and looking at specific academic skill sets, we're looking at what kind of learner are we trying to develop here, right? Do we want to develop students who are curious, who are able to communicate? And I think that's why humane education fits so well with this type of mentality about education overall, right? If we think about what we're doing as a way of creating a type of learner, as opposed to a specific skill set or a specific academic goal, I think we really change the way we approach what we're doing, and we create different types of learners and outcomes.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really grateful for these contributions, beautiful thoughts and responses to this question. I'd like for us to just switch directions a little bit and think externally about marketing and promoting our humane education programs. I think this is all a challenge. This is a challenge we've all faced at one point or another in informal humane education. The question comes from an educator who appears to be having some trouble promoting their education program, and they're seeking tips to promote their education program on social media specifically. Morris, you do such a fantastic job with this in Liberia. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts to share on this topic.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I think we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, coming in just a little scratchy.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether you are hearing me now. Are you hearing me?
Unfortunately, we're struggling to hear you. Let's try maybe removing your headphones and seeing if you can talk into your device as opposed to using the headphones.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't know whether you are hearing me. Okay. Humane education is conducted with the purpose of bringing about changes in society. Whether it has to do with animals, it has to do with the environment, or it has to do with people. And people always like to see what you have been doing to address the issue. While it's true, it is important for people to know the problem, but in order to promote humane education, you should focus on the positive aspect of humane education. What are those things that you are doing to address the issues that are affecting animals, to address the issues that are affecting people and the environment? A lot of people don't have the time to go through a lot of things on social media. You have to be on the point and a very short with achievement. People want to see what have you done to address the issue than posting pictures, images, or stories that degrading people. A lot of people don't want to see degrading images. People want to see successes. People want to see what are those things that you are doing to address the issue. So most of the time, what we do in Liberia is to focus on what we are doing to address the issues that affect animals, that affect people, and that affect the environment. Then focusing on the bad aspect of it.
Very good. Yes, that's extremely helpful. And I can certainly understand that position, encouraging people to get more involved by sharing the great successes of your program in quick posts on social media as they're happening and making it relevant to your audience. That's great, Morris. Thank you. Does anyone else have thoughts to add to this topic? Yes, Kim.
Well, first I want to say I really appreciate what Moore said about people are so busy. So it's just, it has to be really quick, and they're so overwhelmed with content. And so you have to have really engaging content that shows what's happening. And I just also wanted to give a tip that a lot of us who are doing the teaching ourselves, it's hard to always create content, if we're teaching, and sometimes if we're working with youth, we might not have images that we can share, because we're protecting privacy. So I encourage all of you, if you're not using Action Sprout already, if you follow Action Sprout, you can pick organizations that are similar to yours and see which posts are trending that relate to what your mission is. And it makes it really easy to schedule and to share. And so that helped us to increase the amount of content that we put. And a lot of places say you should be doing 2 to 3 posts a day if you really want to have engagement. And that's hard to create that much yourself. And if you're sharing others and letting them know that you're sharing, they'll be more likely to share what you're doing as well.
Beautiful. Yes, the power of collaboration right there. And Kim, is Action Sprout, do you mind adding that in the chat section for our attendees? And is it a free service, or is it a paid subscription service?
Oh, that's a great question. So it is actually a free service if you use their basic, which is what we use, and then you can always pay money if you want to enhance. So at the basic, it limits how many organizations you can follow at a time, but you can always switch. So you can have different ones, and it'll show the most popular posts and what's trending, and also help you to think about ways to it's a way that you can learn how to create posts that are going to be engaging by seeing what other people are doing successfully.
Excellent. Any other thoughts on marketing? Okay. So in starting to just shift gears again here, I'd like for us to examine another question related to resource use in the classroom. The question comes from a formal educator. The question is, as we have discussed so far, there are many obstacles for educators who would like to utilize humane education resources, books, lessons, films, etc. in school settings. What do you think is the best way to bring in resources to classroom settings while being cognizant of school culture, norms, opinions? Erin, do you have any thoughts on this topic just to get the conversation started?
Sure. Well, I would start with saying, if you are in a formal education institution, a formal K-12 setting, it's okay to be the change maker there. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And I would say you're taking that first step forward. So you're ready to kind of try something new. So that's the first step. Don't fear that. There's always resistance when things change in the beginning, right? And then as you start to think about what your goals are for bringing these resources in, I would have that conversation with your leadership and start discussing with them what your goals are, why you think this pathway is important for the students in your classroom and perhaps for the school as a whole. I think ultimately what we all want to see is comprehensive and holistic approaches to humane education school-wide. But that can start with one classroom. That can start with one successful classroom. So I think having that conversation early on with your leadership and with your colleagues is really important. So keeping those lines of communication open and also bringing other teachers on board. As we just saw, collaboration and cooperation is one of the best ways to move the ball forward. And I think there's, when you're in a formal institution, sometimes we get kind of pegged in our own classrooms and we fail to reach out. So I would open up those lines of communications to your colleagues and certainly leadership. And then it's time to get down to details, right? So how do I bring in the resources? Where do I look for resources that are appropriate for my classroom? it's hard to speak kind of generally about what school cultures are like because they're so specific, both geographically specific, with subculture specific within regions, right? Schools themselves create their own culture. So it's difficult to say concretely, this is how you should approach, because it's hard to say what those specific circumstances may be. But I think that there are plenty of resources, certainly through the Humane Education Coalition. We offer links to many other folks who have lesson plans, books, literature that can be useful. And I think that having those types of resources at your fingertips is extremely useful and will be a good place to start. And then I think getting feedback would be the final piece of that puzzle. So when we talk about evaluation or figuring out whether things are going well, we can talk about that on many levels. And I think the first step is finding out how your students are responding to the types of resources you're bringing into the classroom. Getting that kind of formative feedback from them is the best way to judge how to move forward and where to go next in your programming. Certainly local resources as well. You may find out that you have an organization in your backyard that can also provide you with some support, and maybe there's a humane educator there who can support you and come in and give you some tips and tricks as well. So I think when you start digging in, getting onto hooking into the resources like the Humane Education Coalition, as well as having those conversations with your colleagues and your leadership, that's the best way to get the ball rolling and get started.
Thank you, Erin. Yes, Lisbet.
Yeah, just to add on to all the great information that Erin just provided about being a change maker, just to offer a little bit on the practical side of, just knowing as a teacher, being immersed in the school culture, the climate, you have colleagues, you have a principal, you have, your different supervisors. So one thing that is really good thing to make sure of is that you can, as a teacher, you should always be able to justify academically the resources that you bring into the classroom to use with students. And keep in mind that analyzing different viewpoints is part of learning standards. So it's not something to be avoided. I've covered topics such as the fact that some people don't eat animals with kindergartners, and also that they hunt baby seals in Canada with kindergartners. So it's not something that you need to shy away from, but you just have to use age-appropriate materials, age-appropriate language. And another thing to keep in mind is always try to build good relationships with your students' parents so that they feel that you always have their child's best interest in mind. So that if anyone questions what you're doing, you know that the parents will be on your side. And I know that from firsthand experience.
Yes, Kim.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what Lisbet was saying, and that I've taught so many topics that would be considered extremely controversial: factory farming, child labor, harm with climate change in the environment, and we've never had a complaint about the topics that we taught about. And I think it's really the approach. And like Lisbet said, school and education is the space to have conversations about difficult issues. And as long as you're creating this space where you can share all different perspectives, and we're not telling the kids what's right or wrong, but we're creating that space for dialogue, that's the justification, is that we're providing a space for them to think critically about issues so that they can decide for themselves how they feel as they grow up. And to me, that's really what education is about, is tackling difficult issues, deciding how I think and feel about them, and deciding what I'm going to do. And then I just wanted to add, on a practical level, as a guest educator, you're going into a lot of different schools, and each school has their own unique culture. So certain resources might be received well in one school and not received well in another. So I was given a very, very good tip when I first started teaching, to share everything with the teacher in advance, because I'm a guest coming into their environment. And I would be sometimes in schools in the same exact neighborhood, and one teacher would say, yes, these photos, these videos are no problem. This is content that I know my students are ready to hear and see. And another teacher would say, no, this photo is not appropriate. This video is not appropriate. And I would say, no problem. I'm coming into your environment. I'm going to tailor my program to what best meets the needs of you, your students, and your community. And then oftentimes, after the teachers saw my approach, they'd be a lot more open to me bringing in more resources, because they realize their students could sometimes handle some topics that they originally thought maybe they wouldn't be able to. But always let them know in advance, and don't be offended if they don't want you to use something. You know, take that resource out and replace it with something different. And you know, you don't want them to say no to everything because they don't want one thing, and it'll open the door for them to hopefully let you do more.
Excellent. Yes, Stephanie.
I mean, I echo everything that everyone's been saying, and it's so important, especially if you're the classroom teacher or visiting educator, but as the classroom teacher who's there all the time, make sure the materials don't accidentally indoctrinate, as Lisbet was really getting at. You know, for example, may have a good animal welfare message, but there may be some accidental, inappropriate messages about who is usually a hero, who, for example, can be the leader, right? You know, look at things like race, look at things like socioeconomic status of all the characters, look at the language that is used, if it's still viable in today's society, or is it sending a message that is no longer acceptable. And these are things that can accidentally sneak up on any educator if you're only looking at a humane education resource maybe from one lens. And in Kim's presentation, she actually talks about looking at the whole, all the lenses, right? The broad-based approach for people, animals, and the environment. So if you haven't seen her presentation yet, make sure you go back and look at it. And then, of course, be prepared for the hot button issues, because yes, education is where we should be talking about these things. We should be looking at things like system thinking and teaching kids at a really young age how to think in a way about the systems in their society, and if they like them, if they value that, or if they'd like to work for a different type of society in the future. And if you know what those hot button issues might be, you can prepare neutral and open-ended questions as the educator to have a discussion. And then you're getting to what Lisbet was talking about, you're hitting academic standards, right? Because you're presenting it in a neutral way.
Very good. Oh, Morris, did you have something to contribute?
Yes, I just wanted to give an example of what we are doing in Liberia. The first thing before we get to the school, we have to work with the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education has to review the material that we have with the content, because it has to be relevant to the communities, to the society. While it is true we go on the internet to download a lot of material resources, but some of the issues that is affecting like people, animals in the US is not the same issues that affect animals in our setting. So we have to use material that is engaging, giving the children the opportunity to critically think and analyze those issues that affect themselves, animals, and the environment. And they will make their own informed decision, but not giving them answers to what are those things that need to be done to address the issue, but giving the children the opportunity to discuss the issues, to analyze the issue, and identify with the problem. Together, they can decide what best, or what are those things that they can do, not you telling them these are things that you need to do.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for that, Morris. We only have 20 minutes left somehow, and I just want to take a quick moment and ask the panelists to please add any resources, reading resources, articles, links, or other items that you would like our participants to know about to the chat section. Let's start sharing early and provide any of those resources. We did receive a question from an anonymous attendee that says, are there other free humane education resources that I can access online? So if you have any suggestions and resources to share, please do add those to the chat section. I would also recommend that all our attendees check out the Humane Education Coalition's resource toolkit. It is on our website at hecoalition.org/toolkit. There are more than 330 resources in that toolkit, including funding, lesson plans, educational opportunities, books, films, all types of resources, and links to other resource banks. So it's kind of a resource bank for resource banks. Yes, Erin.
I just wanted to say this conversation sparked something, a conversation that Stephanie and I have had multiple times about classroom teachers and how sometimes they might not even be aware that they're actually teaching with a humane pedagogy already. And that's also something to keep in mind for our formal classroom teachers who are with us today. As you're going through and learning more about what humane education is and becoming more familiar with these resources, you might find that a lot of the things that you're already doing apply to this humane philosophy, or you're teaching with a humane pedagogy. And I think that that's something that is important to keep in mind, that it's not always something that you have to learn to do, or it's something new that you have to take on. It's sometimes just a matter of tweaking or shifting a little bit, or opening up that conversation or dialogue within your classroom or amongst your colleagues if you're doing collaborative teaching. So it doesn't always have to feel so overwhelming to folks who are maybe starting from scratch or starting new. Not only are there great resources out there, but when you scratch the surface, you might find that you're already aligning your teaching approach with a humane pedagogy. So just another thing to keep in mind.
Thank you. Yes, Lisbet.
I just wanted to add on something quick to what Erin was saying, that also I find when a lot of teachers start learning about humane pedagogy and looking at things through a humane lens, it opens up, they start to see other opportunities in the rest of their curriculum for being able to infuse humane education. So it sparks more after you start learning about it. So you may already be doing it, and then it sparks more opportunities, which is fantastic.
Great. We touched on the topic of veganism, school food choice, and maybe some unique reactions from parents and educators just a bit already, but I did want to just go back and address this question that we received yesterday during our coffee and conversation panel and were unable to answer. We ran out of time. It comes from our attendee, Uma. How do we handle people, especially parents, who are offended by the concepts of environmental protection through veganism, don't find it appropriate, and don't want this being taught through school or art programs? Does anyone have any thoughts, maybe just an extension to what we were earlier discussing? Yes, Lisbet.
Well, just to reiterate about building good relationships with parents already and justifying everything academically in your classroom, but parents don't have to agree with everything that you do, but if you should try to explain the justification for talking about how, the fact of the matter is that not eating or eating less animals is better for the environment. So if you're presenting accurate information and you can justify that to your administration, then they can back you up on that as well, because you're presenting factual information here. So it's really not about opinions at that point.
Great. Excellent. Yes, Sarah. Sarah, you are muted again. Let me just see if I can help you. Okay.
So two examples, one especially that comes from our Institute for Human-Animal Connection, is that we always try to teach and approach humane education from the One Health approach, and that is helping participants, or when we're training our students to go out in the world and do humane education, is help people to understand the interconnectedness of human, animal, and environmental health, which is, of course, the main tenet of humane education. But if we can give concrete examples, as Lisbet was also just talking about, is that, again, sharing the facts. When we consume animals, or even, you know, we could go so far, and this is kind of beyond the scope of this particular question, but even non-organic or conventionally farmed fruits and vegetables and whatnot, that causes environmental harm, that also causes human harm. Presented as facts and help people to understand that when we cause harm in any one of those three sectors, humans, animals, or the environment, then harms happen to all three sectors. And that sort of takes some of the finger pointing towards strictly a dietary choice to better critical thinking skills. Another approach that I sometimes use in my training of our graduate students is helping them to help young children plant the seeds of love and compassion. So not necessarily going in and talking about dietary choices, but talking about the behavior and social lives of chickens, of cows, of goats, of wildlife, and so that children can start to fall in love, and then when they get older, they can make those choices based on the knowledge and the love that they already possess, as they start making those natural connections to what's on their plate and who they've already fallen in love with.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, Kim.
And just to add another example of how you can approach it, you can do it in the context of thinking about current events and laws. And then this is just one example that we're tackling. So we wrote a lesson when there was all these laws being proposed about enriching cages of hens who are in battery cages on factory farms. And so it was really in the context of civics and government and voting and how are we going to vote. And so this is one example. So I think schools can see that, like, oh, this is something kids might have to decide how they want to vote on something. This is just one example of thinking about it. And so we give different perspectives that were the common perspectives in society. One person who opposes the bill of having enriched cages because of the expense and because their opinion was animals are here for the use of people. Another person's opinion was that we should support the enriched cages because we should pay more money for the humane treatment of the animals. And then a third person who opposed it because they believed in the humane treatment of animals and they didn't think the law went far enough. And they didn't think we should be using animals for people's food at all and that it wasn't necessary. And then we had the kids think about, could there be other perspectives? And we think about all the different perspectives. They discuss the pros and cons of these different perspectives. And then they decide if they were really going to vote on this, how would they vote? So we're thinking about farm animals, but it's really in the context of civics. And so again, they're learning the skills about seeing multiple perspectives, deciding how they would vote, and then they could apply that to other issues that are going to be voted on in society.
I like that. That's a very gentle, compassionate approach. Yes, Stephanie.
I think this is the perfect example of knowing the culture of your school, knowing the culture of the community with whom you're working. Some of the educators I work with in the CHES program, they live in places where they can actually go in with a lesson that they openly say, this is about veganism, and we're going to talk about eating animals or not eating animals. Other educators, they say, you know, there's no way they could do that. They would be immediately removed from the school. And so if someone works in a place like that, they need to know what is acceptable. This is also a case, this topic where modeling can be really powerful. If the community of the school is not yet ready for, you know, a lesson itself, students watch the educator. When I was in the classroom, I taught for almost 10 years in a very rural, very farm-based community. I was probably the only vegan teacher in the middle school. So I knew I had to be very careful. But my students slowly watched what I was eating. They would watch the things that I would put into my coffee cup, right? And they would begin to ask questions. Just that informal discussion was extremely powerful. And it began to change the culture, the way that the students would be open to different materials. Now, of course, I recognized I had to be careful what I brought into the school formally, but we could have a lot of great discussions if we had 5 extra minutes or during lunchtime. By the end of the year, a good many of my students actually were trying vegetarian options. They were taking recipe ideas home to their parents. And it was really nice to see, and it didn't even have to be a formal lesson plan.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. And Morris, did you have something you'd like to share? Let me unmute you here. There you go.
Yes, we also run a program that has to do with plant-based diet in the schools that we are working in. And because we want for children to know where their food comes from, so we have a program called the School Garden. So in many of the schools that we have our program, we have a school garden program there. The purpose of that program is one, is to connect children with their food, to know where their food comes from. And the next thing is to look at the importance of plant-based diet to their own health, to the environment, and to the animals. But many of the time, we also have a program that enables these children to invite their parents and to share this plant-based diet with their parents. And in nearly all of the schools, all we want us to continue the kind of program because they themselves have seen the importance. The children are now connected to their food, and they are seeing the importance of the plant-based diet to their own health. So it has to be something that that will attract the people, not to only focus on the welfare of animals, but looking at their own health, looking at the environment will make parents to value what you are doing.
Thank you, Morris. Yes, Erin.
I just wanted to add on that if we also think about it from a multicultural perspective, there are many cultures in the world who have different approaches to diet and eating than we do in our in the Western world, and we often kind of get entrenched in our own universe, which is normal. But I think it's important to think about our world more globally, and if we want our students to be understanding of diverse cultures, then we can also bring in food and the way we relate to our food from a multicultural perspective. I think that's another way to kind of start a conversation. Maybe a more gentler approach, but certainly a more socially just approach, and helps achieve that goal of diversity and inclusive behaviors.
Yes, Vincie.
Yeah, so I just saw in the comments that Bo and Kyla, they have a school garden in that school, and this is also something like wonderful, and also helps it helps our job being a humane educator, especially as when what Stephanie said, when you cannot formally and overtly talk about a certain topic inside the classroom, we have to make use of other ways, extracurricular activities, lunch hours, where students can actually enjoy the food, like the organic veggies that they plant themselves, and they'll be like a lot more engaged in that kind of conversation. And also, like, the lunch hour is also like the best opportunity for students to learn like mutual respect. They learn about facts about the food waste problem, for example. So there are tons of things that we can do outside of the classroom. And so far we haven't really talked about how we can actually make use of like extra curricular activities to bring in humane education. I'm not sure about I'm sorry if I deviate a little bit from the question, but I'm not sure about the situation in the US. But in Hong Kong, for example, besides the college level, quite a number of private and government subsidized secondary schools actually organize overseas study tours for students. And I see that as the best opportunity to teach humane education in the context of travel, because if done correctly, because when students are confronted with new cultures and new environments, students will learn how to act mindfully, respect other cultures that are different from theirs, and embrace diversity. They'll learn how to make sure the money they spend goes to support the local economy, and they will learn to what to do to avoid contributing to abuses of working animals in the travel industry. And they will also learn to protect the environment of the places they visit. So activities like that, or study tours, that's one of the amazing ways to engage students in that's a perfect humane education experience, in my opinion.
Yes, very comprehensive. Yes, Lisbet.
So I just wanted to cycle back around to something Sarah had mentioned about building a foundation of knowledge in children about animals typically used for food. So, many people look at cows, pigs, chickens, and other animals usually consumed for food as nameless objects, faceless objects that just get turned into food without a personal story. But something that we offer on the TeachKind website is a series of rescue stories for K-12 educators that you can use as reading comprehension worksheets. So they're short text, and they talk about a real rescue story about an animal. And I've always found that rescue stories are a great way to help students learn about the situation that the animal had to be rescued from. And it's like a gentle way to introduce them to the horrors of factory farming. So on our website, the TeachKind website, we have a whole series of reading comprehension worksheets where you have questions that focus on literal, evaluative, and inferential questions. So it's something that you can include in your literacy, the literacy part of your day on a daily basis.
Great. Great. It is hard to believe we're nearing the top of the hour. There are so many great questions coming in to the Q&A that we did not have time to cover today. I think we could talk for easily another hour, if not more, to cover more of these great questions. We had some other questions here I was hoping we would discuss. One of them was the golden question, the question that we hear again and again and again from those involved in humane education. I am constantly challenged with how to get into the schools in my area to teach humane education. How can I build relationships with schools and connect with educators? We didn't have time to talk about it today, but I do want to just put in a plug for Lisbet Chiriboga's speaker session in the summit later today, where she does go in depth about this exact topic. It is a question that we hear often, and I think some of her practical suggestions for building those relationships are really valuable. So definitely check that out. I also want to let everyone know that we will be collecting all of the questions you've asked here. I'll try to field them to some of our panelists for individual responses. And we really do encourage you to jump into the summit after I have uploaded this video, the recording of today's session, to ask your questions there as well. Our panelists can make themselves available over the next few days to answer any of your questions and to converse in more depth and share their content information and continue to build these valuable relationships. This is all the time we have, and as we wrap up our panel discussion, I just want to share a reminder that participants who attend all 3 live panel discussions during the summit, you don't have to watch them live, but if you watch them during the summit, are invited to download a certificate of completion with 3 contact hours documented from the University of Denver's Institute for Human-Animal Connection. The certificate is offered at no cost to participants and will be available to download at the end of the summit. And we do recommend checking with your state regulatory agency to determine if the panel discussions and certificate will meet the continuing education requirements for your profession. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us today. And thank you again to our participants for joining the Tea and Teaching panel discussion. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of a lot of these issues, and I can't wait for future coalition events where we can really continue with these roundtable discussions and start digging in a little deeper. Thank you to our participants for joining us, and we hope you will join us for future discussions and take time to view many of the amazing speaker sessions in the summit, including several from the panelists right here. One final reminder, summit participants who make a donation in any amount to the coalition during the summit will be entered to win one of 7 boxes of books from the Griffin Press. And these are beautifully illustrated children's picture books that focus on humane education. And you can donate right on our website at hecoalition.org/give to enter to win. And I just want to send a massive thank you and so much love and gratitude to this incredible panel for your time today. Thank you so much. You can unmute yourselves if you like.
Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for your questions.
Great questions.